our question then is, as the dynamics get more complicated, and they are chaotic, as we've discussed, how can we navigate? Because it can be quite overwhelming. We can feel like, I just don't know how to handle it. I mean, one situation, okay. But when another person walks in the room, or it's a complex meeting, you're on a Zoom call and there's all these little squares on the screen, you know, it can just seem like impossible. But I want to use this metaphor of traffic. This is a fundamental metaphor within this particular approach, green light communication approach. If you know when to go forward, when to be careful, and when to stop, we could avoid the unnecessary delays and dangerous crashes. And think about this. This is not abstract. I live in a big city now. I used to live in Los Angeles. Los Angeles was one of the traffic capitals of the world. And at rush hour in Los Angeles, you've got millions of cars pushing in different directions. They all have different agendas. And you say, well, there's crashes that happen. And this is true, crashes do happen. But really, how rarely they happen relative to those millions of vehicles. And the reason that they don't happen is because there is a system. It's a very simple system. And we're going to adopt the simplicity of this system to navigate conversations, because it works for those millions of cars. Let's utilize the simplicity of that. Now, the traffic light, colors might be slightly different depending on your culture. The traffic light is this metaphor for when is communication open and flowing, when is it closed, and when is it sort of in the middle. And this traffic light happens one moment at a time. So the traffic light is a present moment assessment tool that allows you to know what to do. Now, some of you might be thinking, you know, boy, yeah, okay. But I mean, really, like present moment assessment tool that's a traffic light where there's 3 options? I mean, life is complicated. There's a lot more than 3 options. And that's definitely what I thought when I first heard about this approach. And how could it be? It's just too simplistic. But actually, the opposite is true. And over the years, my view has switched completely, because I've understood that this simple model is endlessly powerful, and its simplicity is its greatest advantage. Because when we get into complicated situations, somebody could say, well, here's the 15 rules of complicated situations. Somebody could say, all right, here's your script of what you're supposed to say. You know, when somebody comes at you and they say this, and this, well, in that situation, you could reply with this, that, you know. And then you get in that situation and your face gets hot and you start sweating and your voice gets a little bit tight. You know, your eye starts twitching, whatever it is, right? We know these situations. Can you remember all those things? The truth is that most of the time you can't. Yeah, sure you can when things are easy. But when things are easy, you don't really need a big system to guide you, right? You need the system when things are hard. That's when these 3 lights come back and can become your greatest advantage, because they allow you to navigate through these complex situations without crashing. So let's talk about what they represent. So the green light represents being open and present. So that's mindful, right? Now, what is open? Your senses are open. We've talked about this. Your emotional capacity is online. You're reading the emotions. You're reading your own emotions. And your mind is present. Your mind is open, actually, you could say. You know, we talk about having an open mind is considered a good thing. Being open-minded. Well, what does that mean? To have an open mind means your mind is not stuck in one idea, in one agenda. Your mind is able to actually see, I think I know why that person just said that. It's not my view, but I can imagine what their view might be. And now I'm curious. I'm curious what their view, the full view is. And instead of, you know, countering what they just said, I'm going to say, could you say more? I want to understand why you just said that. Can you say more about why you're saying that? Oh, and then they say something that's unexpected. Oh, I see. Actually, I hadn't thought about it that way. And in this way, having an open mind allows us to flow with the chaos. Having open senses allows us to see a changing situation as that worry crosses somebody's face. You know, having our emotions be part of our mindfulness lets me know, oh, I am getting triggered, as we would say in English. I'm starting to get a little upset in this situation. Now, that's not necessarily good or bad. It's hard to say, actually. That upset could be a really important warning signal about something that's going on. Or it could allow me to self-regulate a little bit to a deeper degree, saying, you know, now is maybe not the time to do what I wanted to do in this meeting because I'm too upset. I'll wait till tomorrow. Let me sleep on this. Let me calm down. This is coming from my personal life, not from the meeting, and I'll take it on tomorrow. So all of these things are what we are in contact with in the green light. And when I say interconnected, this is back to this idea that what's happening here, over here, or, you know, with me, connects me to the greatest degree possible with everyone else in the room. Or in the case of it could be a Zoom room, you could be all over the planet. But that's it. So you see that in that interconnected, chaotic, but interconnected nature, we are all changing each other in real time. Everything, I briefly studied theater improv. I don't know if this happens in all cultures, but theater improv is live theater, and it's mostly comedy, but you don't have a script, and nobody's making it up. You make it up together. And I studied with a beautiful teacher, Matt Smith, in Seattle, and he came up with this phrase: everything changes everything. When you are up on stage and nobody has a plan, everything changes everything. And the truth is that in that situation, part of why it was actually a very powerful contemplation, very meditative, is if you start to run with your agenda, like you want to look funny and you want to make a bunch of jokes, and you're not paying attention to your team members you're with, you ruin it. You absolutely ruin it. And it's almost always not very funny. all the energy drops out of the situation. The other people feel awkward. Whereas if you are tuned in and interconnected, the funniest things come up, and nobody plans them. They are just spontaneous expressions of the attunement within the people on stage. So it's a representation of the green light. Some of you have maybe seen bad comedy improv. I've seen so much of this, I find it actually really tedious. But when you see it happen, when you see people genuinely up there together being so present, it's magic. And this can happen in our communication as well within the green light. So knowing that this state is possible is really important. And we'll get back to what to do with that state. So the yellow light, now the yellow light is when we start to lose confidence. I lose confidence in myself. And this is where we attack ourselves. This is by far the most uncomfortable of the three lights. This is where all those little voices in your mind start saying terrible things about you. And we become fixated in an inward way. This is a deeply introverted state. And it's not introverted in a fun way. I mean, some of you are introverts, and that's great. But this is introversion in a brutal way, in an unkind way. We start, and it's not just saying, you know, like I didn't do a good job in that meeting, because sometimes you don't. Let's be honest. Sometimes we didn't do a good job in the meeting. Okay, that's fine. This goes beyond that. This is, you know, you didn't do a good job in that meeting, therefore, and it's just a kind of inhuman assessment that gives us no ground to stand on. You know, you are fundamentally wrong somehow. There's something fundamentally wrong with you. We don't even say the words. We just feel it as this kind of clenching anxiety. And it's worse than anybody else saying it to us, because it's inside ourselves. You know, if somebody else said it, you could say, I don't buy what they have to say. But when it's you saying it to yourself, you really believe it. So this is a critical state in terms of communication, because when we're in this state of the yellow light, we're not really very open at all. In fact, we're like halfway shut. This is the in-between being open and closed state. We're halfway shut. And honestly, we're really vulnerable. You could even say gullible. We're gullible to being influenced by whatever comes at us. So if something comes at us with the wrong answer, we may cling to that because we're just desperate for something to be a little more clear. It feels very foggy and very painful. So somebody says, here, just go back into the meeting and tell them this. Okay, we go back into the meeting and we do the wrong thing. Now, on the flip side, we are very gullible in a way that if something positive comes to us, we may actually really go with that. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. What is that like to actually have that positive influence show up? So it's a critical state. It is a critical state. If we don't deal with that state properly, we lose the whole thing. And we'll talk about that now. I mean, if we don't deal with the yellow light properly, then you get the red light. Now, the red light is where we shut down to external connection. We cut ourselves off. And here we become fixated in an outward way. So before we were sort of internally focused. Here we become externally focused. And the reason we do this with the red light is only from the pain of the yellow light. It's so painful to be saying these really unfair things about ourselves. And I won't say unfair, untrue things about ourselves. None of us are fundamentally messed up. None of us are fundamentally incapable. None of us are fundamentally unforgivable for having made a mistake. You know, you make a mistake and then you have to work with it and then you correct it and you move on. That's the truth. But these yellow light voices are so harsh that we want to shut down more completely and push this feeling outward. And we push this feeling onto others. We say it's not, it's not me that's incapable. It's that team. They're incapable. It's not me that can't be forgiven for a mistake. It's you that can't be forgiven for making a mistake. So it's an attempt to offload the emotional experience. Let me highlight this, all because I'm being unfair to myself to begin with. If I wasn't unfair to myself to begin with, I wouldn't need to shut down and push this emotional experience onto somebody else. And the red light is where we cause a lot of disruption. Because far from being interconnected, it is disconnected. And it is inaccurate. It's here, we were trying to navigate in our car through traffic. My eyes are closed now. I'm just imagining where I want things to be. I'm imagining cars that aren't even there. And you say, oh, I feel so much more relieved when I imagine the road that I wish I was on. Well, you're in a dangerous situation. Driving with your eyes closed is never useful. The red light is never useful, not even for 1 split second. Much better to have your eyes open when navigating.